We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our February brown bag. Do you know your rights? Erin had to bow out of today's brown bag because she's currently recovering from an injury. But a huge thank you to Athena who filled in at the last minute. Athena and I actually met at the Children with Diabetes conference in White Plains this past October, so they're doing me a huge favor. You guys know the drill for our mission and how we do it. DPAC aims to expand access to care for people with diabetes, educate lawmakers, and train people to become advocates for diabetes. And please follow us on social media if you haven't. Our handles are Diabetes Pack on Instagram and Twitter, or X, and DPAC on Facebook. So these are our two featured speakers today. Jessica von Goeler is a trailblazer in the maritime industry, making history as the first person with type 1 diabetes to graduate from Massachusetts Maritime Academy and obtain original U.S. Coast Guard license for large commercial ships. And beyond the maritime world, Jessica has left her mark across diverse sectors, including power and water, nonprofit, retail, higher education, and life sciences. So she has excelled in various professional landscapes. Jessica is a project management consultant at the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute, and she lives outside of Boston with her family and has had type 1 diabetes for over 48 years, and has a lot of experience, unfortunately, facing discrimination for diabetes, which she'll be sharing with us today. Athena Sofides is a Master of Environmental Science candidate at Yale School of the Environment, sorry. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, Athena has always been interested in what defines the environment and how that impacts people's experience of health and well-being. And Athena's work engages with research, legal advocacy, grassroots organizing, and storytelling to address medical and environmental injustice. Athena was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in October 2023, I believe right before we met, and is passionate about diabetes advocacy and education. So thank you both so much for being with us today. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see our two speakers. And our first question, I'm going to ask, could you please introduce yourselves, even though I kind of just did, and give a small recap of your journey with diabetes?
Sure, I can get us started. And thank you, Amanda. You got my name perfect. So I'm Jessica von Goeler, and as Amanda said, I've had diabetes for over 48 years, maybe 48 and a half. And my journey was to prove everybody wrong and be all the things they said I couldn't be back in 1975, which was a mom, a college alumni, a professional, a homeowner, alive, things like that. That has been my whole journey, is to prove everybody wrong, and then to celebrate those successes. Um, First, with the people in my life who've made it possible. All of them have. It doesn't matter. Many of the people in my life have been viewed themselves more as bystanders, but truly they have been the biggest to get me up in the morning and make sure I get it done. So that's my little journey.
Thank you, Athena.
Yeah, so I think I may have given you the wrong date. I was diagnosed in October 2022. So it's been about a year and a half. And I was diagnosed with type 1 just shy of my 25th birthday. And right after some big transitions in my life, including moving to a new state and starting grad school. So I went through feeling very sick and kind of just vaguely chronically ill for a few years, trying to advocate for myself, get any kind of diagnosis for a range of symptoms I was having, but kept being told that I was fine. And eventually it just hit a point where I was not able to function anymore, and then got really sick, and then thankfully was diagnosed. And so there's been a lot of frustration in my journey, unfortunately, but I think it has underscored the importance of advocacy and also community and interdependence, and just learned so much from other diabetics, the advocacy community. And I got involved with the Diabetes Link, formerly known as College Diabetes Network, through a fellowship that they did. which is currently accepting applications. It's a really great program just for community building and advocacy around diabetes. But yeah, community and educating yourself and each other and just advocating for yourself has been the crux of my journey with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry about the wrong date. That makes a lot more sense. I would be
That's part
surprised
of
to hear
fighting
that. Yeah, I was also part of that fellowship program, I think, the year before you. So I also think that that's a great program if anyone's interested. So starting out with what was probably both of your first experiences advocating for yourselves, Athena and Jessica, tell us about your experiences with diabetes in school. What did you know at the time about your rights, whether it's about if you qualify for having extended time or flexible deadlines, or if you just had to speak up for yourself at exact moments of crisis?
I'm willing to bet we've had two very different experiences. The first one that I can really remember was in fourth grade. At that point, 504s were on the book, but they weren't really used, and diabetes wasn't covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act yet. So it was all came down to education and advocacy. And I remember my teacher wouldn't let me go to the bathroom, and I was pretty convinced I didn't have the right to go. I mean, fourth grade. So my parents came in. They showed a reel-to-reel movie, My Friend EDI, which I'm really sorry I can't find anymore. They answered some questions and got me my bathroom privileges. I think the most important thing on that was that the education and advocacy were the pieces that I have now repeated over and over and over to get my access that I need.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That sounds really annoying and nightmarish.
It wasn't fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's so horrible. It's good to see how far things have come, but there's also still so much left to do. But my experience has been quite different. Basically seeking accommodations for the first time in an academic setting as a graduate student. So I didn't know that diabetes was considered a disability at first. I mean, I started school not knowing I had diabetes, and then a month later, I was like, okay, so I have diabetes. Cool. I have a disability. Um, and then somebody told me that some nurse who had a friend with type 1 who went to my school said that we're entitled to accommodations. So I had reached out to my university's Office of Student Accessibility Services. Most schools have something like that, an Office of Disability Services or accommodations. So I met with them and had to provide some medical documentation, which was very easy given the abundance of medical records we all have. But usually you just have to have a proof of your diagnosis and then speak with the representative at the office about what kinds of accommodations are appropriate or needed for what you have. And for what I was given, it's the most important thing for me because I don't really have exams in my classes, although I also do have the right to extended time on exams, which is huge. Just being able to have my medical devices in the classroom, be able to freely go to the bathroom as needed, being able to take breaks and leave or stay and treat a low with food or snacks. So really important things like that. And then also there are lots of accommodations that you can unofficially get through like less official channels than a list of accommodations from the Office of Student Accessibility Services. Like if you're close or feel comfortable with asking a particular professor um, for an accommodation in that class, you can do that. I think it makes sense if you feel comfortable going to get the official accommodations in writing. It's good to have it documented in case of a violation of those accommodations. You have proof of it. And also, if you ever want to take a standardized test, you can use those accommodations as proof backing up your request for extended time or um, whatever else you might be seeking there. And another important thing that I learned in academic accommodations is, for me, it has helped to be transparent with my professors at the beginning of the semester and explain that I have diabetes and these are my school granted accommodations, but sometimes this might look like me being late to class if I had to treat a low, for example, or I might be stepping out of the class sometimes. And I have also requested one-off needs like an extension due to having like a difficult diabetes day, which is not an official accommodation, but often professors and some employers might be amenable to that, but it really does depend. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of discrimination to navigate there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so helpful. I wanted to share, I had a similar experience in college. I also had like extended time. I think actually flexible deadlines is something you can also get in writing. But I've also asked for extensions for that, like just all staying up all night, treating several loads or something like that. I also heard from another friend who has diabetes that you can get priority registration when you register for classes, which I didn't know when I was in college, which would have been great to know, and kind of just emphasizes that there's no way really for us to know these things. Like all of us are just hearing from word of mouth from other people, and it's kind of putting a lot of us at a disadvantage who don't have a lot of contacts who have diabetes. So hopefully that's what we're doing with this webinar, and hopefully DPAC tries to spread the word in other diabetes organizations as well. But yeah, extended time, flexible deadlines, priority registration, and there's a lot of it's like the sentiment among people with diabetes where you kind of are wary about whether you deserve that. I know, Jessica, you mentioned I mean, you were like 9 years old, but you definitely felt like you didn't deserve to go to the bathroom, and I am in the same boat. Like we all feel like, oh, that's a lot. Like, I'm not sure if I'm that, like I need that much, but you do. Chances are you do. And you're kind of convincing yourself you don't. But yeah, just wanted to share my experience with accommodations in school. And moving on to the professional world, as a professional, does living with diabetes impact how you consider changing jobs or employers?
Absolutely on my end. Most of my professional life, the pre-existing clause was an issue. And my first job had Blue Cross Blue Shield, where I was covered, or actually my family's plan was Blue Cross Blue Shield. And they had the best Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So then when I went to work, I had to find companies offering Blue Cross Blue Shield. And oftentimes there was confusion as to whether or not I had to get the same plan or it could be any plan. Now I find with the removing those clauses, what has really changed is now I'm looking at health insurance packages and making decisions to stay with an employer based on them, or not take a job or not apply for a job based on them, because I really want the plan that will meet my needs and is affordable. And if that's my choice now, that's what I seek out.
Jessica, do you mind turning your audio off and on for a second? There's just a lot of static. I think it was hard to hear you for a second. Okay, can you turn it back on?
Yeah, how's that?
Oh yeah, that's so much better. Sorry, do you want to repeat the last part of what you said? I'm so sorry.
Oh, just the last part is the healthcare packages that employers offer are a deal breaker for me. I will leave a job if they change providers and the provider doesn't meet my needs, or if I'm looking for a job, I will be very explicit in, can I review the policies before I accept. So it's a nice to have the choice though.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry about the connection issue.
No problem.
Also just quickly wanted to address one of the questions in the Q&A, which was, do you bring your medical diagnosis documents to college? Which, yes, and I mainly use like electronic forms though. I find that to be easier. But you basically just need like proof, and like yeah, I guess it would be best to just bring everything you have or like a copy of everything you have. There are other Q&As here. Just because some people found your video, my friend EDI. Thank you so much for that. One person asked, is there a federal law or any state laws requiring stores to provide access to restrooms? I am not sure about that. We can look into that and get back to you. I'm not sure about specific laws, but it does seem something that disability accommodations would provide. But we'll look into that and get back to you. Sorry to interrupt. Athena, please go ahead with your answer to diabetes as a professional.
Yeah, so I received my diagnosis once right as I started grad school, and I already had a job previously. And I felt comfortable explaining to my employer if we have a good relationship, so I felt comfortable giving an update to them. But definitely now having diabetes influences the way I think about employment after school, like full-time employment. And just I think a lot of people don't understand the stress of needing to secure full-time work to have good insurance, or the alternative, not working too much so that you can qualify for state insurance if your state has good insurance coverage for diabetes. So it's a lot to think about that I think a lot of folks who don't have diabetes never think of.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. On that note, I was gonna ask, when it comes to, I know Athena, you probably haven't experienced this, but when it comes to job interviews, you are not obligated to disclose that you have diabetes. And in your personal experience, have you, I guess this is more toward Jessica, have you disclosed this, and why or why not?
So typically I do not disclose it at all. Um, I know that it increases their insurance costs on their end. And if you give somebody any ammunition to put your resume aside, then avoid that, right? My diabetes isn't part of that hiring decision. I have no problem disclosing it once I'm hired. Um, I've only volunteered it once. I had a job with a biotech that was working on a rare disease that causes extreme low blood sugars, worse than, oh, I can't remember what that's called. But anyways, it was the patients would have to have cornstarch and mixed with something every 4 to 6 hours to keep their blood sugars stable. And at that point, I was able to say, I can really understand how scary it is waiting to know if you're going to have a low blood sugar. Um, but other than that, I don't think I've ever disclosed it because there was no connection.
And are there other situations where you feel like disclosing your diabetes puts you at a disadvantage or risk?
I don't think so. I know I know I hear a lot of chatter about social rejection, but I just kind of look at that. Well, that's all right. That's not somebody I want in my life. Um, or I guess if I know somebody's going to come out and say my grandma or my cat has diabetes, I might just avoid saying it because I don't want to hear it. That's about it.
Yeah, I know we all relate to that.
Yep.
Um, have either of you faced any roadblocks or challenges related to your diabetes throughout your professional life? If so, how did you navigate them?
I know I have. I don't know if Athena wants to go first. I keep jumping in, so.
Mine have you're welcome to go first, Jessica. I can go after. Yeah.
All right. So I definitely have. Amanda, as you said in the beginning that, I wanted to go to Mass Maritime. They told me no, I had diabetes. This was again before diabetes was included in the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it took friends, family, my endocrinologist, a whole team of people to move that mountain so that I would be able to go. And every semester was a test for the next semester, including things like firefighting training and an internship on an oil tanker. Those were all steps to get to the next semester. And so when I finished, the Coast Guard then said, no, you can't get your license. It's against the Code of Federal Regulations. So again, friends, family, now the maritime community, my endocrinologist, we all engage in a much higher level advocacy campaign than fourth grade and getting access to the bathroom. It was then Senator Markey in Massachusetts and Senator Kennedy, or then Representative Markey. And still to this day, I mean, it's been 30 something years. Every time I have the chance, I thank them because it had such an impact being able to change those laws and then be the first person to graduate, to get my license, and then to go out to sea with original documentation. And one of the things that would drive me nuts is if you were licensed to go out to sea and you develop type 2, you could stay. So that was one of the pieces like, well, wait a minute, there's some concerns here. So that was all amazing. And it didn't end there. Of course, my first job, I was unfit. I did wind up working for them. But I have found since then, it's a repeated sentiment. There's somewhere along the line, I will hear, can you do this? Right? Is this something that's, are you fit for this? Or you flat out, we can't employ you under these terms. And while I have those rights now, my answer is still that education and advocacy is my first step. But I will engage an attorney if they're actually breaking a law, mostly to protect myself. I'm not so interested in making another organization pay. It's more, what do I need to survive? If you're gonna just drop me off here and I can't work anymore, what do I do about my insurance? So it's those types of things that I think about versus the, you really made me mad.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like such a headache. I'm sorry. So that would happen repeatedly throughout your professional career. I
I
really
didn't
admire
pick an
you
easy
for,
path.
and I admire you for your spirit. Honestly, that's actually very inspirational for a lot of other people with diabetes, even though we
Yeah.
say like times are
Well,
changing. I'm sure people still face a lot of discrimination.
and I did make a point to prove everybody wrong. So some of my choices, were like, I could have avoided that. But nope, not me.
No, yeah, you're doing advocates work.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for doing that. That's the sort of thing that gives me hope about when things seem bleak because there's still so much that needs to be done.
There's still so much. Yes.
Yeah. I see somebody in the Q&A had asked something related to what I was going to answer, but somebody asked if you're working full time, how do you have time to exercise, prepare healthy food in advance, and manage the disease well? That is probably one of my biggest struggles living, like working and being in school with diabetes, and trying to just, full time be an organ consciously. It's a lot of work, and it's been a huge learning curve in a short period of time for me, and just necessarily means that I can't perform at the level I used to be able to when my life was a lot simpler. And it can be very hard, but I think, yeah, accommodations, knowing your rights and accommodations and what discrimination is technically as some measures to see if your employer or people at work are doing things that are causing you distress in some way, and yeah, learning more about the advocacy that's happened in the past and what's possible. And I think also like recognizing that there's so much that we have to juggle at all times, and it's okay to partake in accommodations that we're legally entitled to, and also that we should be able to access because of just the amount of weight that we have on us and amount of responsibility we have. And like Amanda was saying, that feeling that you might not be deserving of accommodations, it's not true. You're very deserving, and it's just like a piece of leveling the playing field. It doesn't even fully level the playing field, but we're definitely entitled to that. And it's okay to not be operating at 100 24/7 because that's not how humans work.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like just putting together the story here, I feel like it's I'm glad that you haven't Athena haven't like faced specific discrimination yet. And I feel like it's because of people like Jessica who have like paved the way in terms of advocacy for people with diabetes. And me as well. I have entered the workforce just a couple years ago, and I'm really lucky and grateful that I feel like I haven't faced a lot of the discrimination that a lot of other people have. And I think it's genuinely because of advocacy. And thank you so much.
It's getting better.
Next-
That's all that matters.
my next question was, what are the most essential rights that every person with diabetes has, no matter what environment you're in?
So my biggest one is access to medication and treatment, whether it's you're in class and you need to treat a low, or your insurance has decided that maybe something like Ozempic will work better than insulin for you, particularly if you're type 1. And in regards to the medications, or when something new comes out and they're like, we don't want to do that, I have found that intervention is the best way. Usually you start with the doctor and you get the letters of medical necessity, but most states have a department of patient protection that sits in their Department of Public Health or in their insurance division, and they're able to intervene, and a lot of them are able to mandate your insurer cover something. And I've had to use those a couple of times. When CGMS first came out, that's something I needed to do. They were like, "Oh, you don't need a constant reading of your blood sugar." I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So that's how I got that through on my insurer. So I
I
think
also
that's the
think,
big one.
oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just go off of that, Jessica. I agree, access to medication, and not just the bare minimum medication, but the medication that you need and want and desire that works best for your lifestyle. And that reminded me that within the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and other federal legal protections, and there are also some state level ones, there's like this general idea of rights to be treated equally in all areas of life. And obviously that's not how the world operates most of the time. But um, there are some spaces where this is even less the case. One example, I was doing a little bit of research on what rights exist for us. I came across a fact sheet for people who are incarcerated and legal rights that those folks have to medical care and situations where medical services are often withheld. And there are a lot of context-specific fact sheets on the Americans with Diabetes Association, so the other ADA's website. So I just wanted to flag that for people with specific context. The ADA has a bunch on their website around legally warranted or legally protected rights at work, at school, for folks who are incarcerated. And there are also some on the Diabetes Link and Type 1 International.
Yeah, thank you so much for flagging those. Yeah, and thank you both for sharing. Like, access to care is certainly of the utmost importance. My last question is, what are some of the lesser known environments where people with diabetes are in fact entitled to accommodations? And then we can also get to some of the Q&A after if we have time.
Like you said earlier, I don't really know. It's not published. You have to guess. But I did recently learn the National Parks Lifetime Pass is one of them. So that's kind of fun. But that's pretty much all I know.
What is the National Parks Lifetime Pass?
All you have to do is prove you have some sort of disability, diabetes, or some discharge papers from a service or Social Security, and you get a pass for life for the national parks for all of them.
Oh, what? I didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa,
I think it
that's
saves
kind
you
of random.
$80, but still.
It's usually
Oh,
for the level of access, it's called the National Park Service Access Pass, I think.
I
And
think so, yeah.
$80 a year usually, but we're entitled to a free lifetime pass.
Wow, that's really nice. I was gonna bring up, someone mentioned in the Q&A about I recently traveled via airplane for the first time, and I was told not to put my pump through the X-ray machine, and they had to do a complete pat down, and I felt extremely vulnerable when it was happening. Do you put your pump through the X-ray machine when traveling? I have heard various things from various people. Personally, I don't put my pump through the X-ray machine. I do ask for the pat down and the separate thing. Um, you guys, what do you guys do?
I have just given in and I pay for TSA pre-check because I am tired of being treated as a criminal just because I'm wearing a pump. Um, when they first started doing the imaging at airports, I've been on a pump since about 85, 86. So before anybody knew, I went through and wiped out my pump. And then went to get a snack, went to have insulin for my snack, and I had a dead pump on the other side of security. So I now refuse and get the pat down. And I will often refuse. They'll offer a privacy screen, but I'm just kind of in that, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm like, no, I want everybody to see that you are doing this to me because everybody's going to be nervous watching somebody get patted down, and just let that happen. It's I don't know. It's a lousy situation, and as much as I hate paying for TSA pre-check, I now can go through without the pat down, and that's been my answer.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm so sorry you go through that and then we all have to experience that. Whenever there's it's heightened at the airport, but also
Yeah.
anytime
Oh,
there's, I went to the museum the other day and I had to go through a metal detector, and it's always it's just an extra stressor. But I didn't know that at TSA you have the option to request a pat down or go through the X-ray
mhm.
machine. And what happens, what has happened to me every time I've flown since wearing even just a CGM, because I started with just a CGM for
Mhm.
about a year and then I started wearing a pump. Even with the CGM, I would set off the metal detector or the TSA checkpoint and then have to get a pat down anyway. So, it's been inevitable for me. So I think just, and then another thing no one had told me about is they have you um you have to scan, you have to do the scan. I don't know what it's
Yeah,
called.
you on your hand, you touch your pump with your hands and then have them scan your hands.
Yeah. So it's really a stressful experience. And like you said, kind of be treated like you're potentially a criminal just because you have medical devices on you. So it can be a lot, but just knowing to expect that the screening process is going to be more thorough than it may have been for you in the past if you weren't wearing a device in the past is a thing. And knowing that you have the right to let TSA know while you're waiting in line, I want to opt out of this and do a pat down instead because I'm wearing a medical device.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the sooner you alert them, the better, because if they
Mhm.
have to find, particularly if you're a female, if they have to find a female security agent, then it can take a longer than, because they're typically staffed with mostly men. And I've had to wait 20, 30 minutes for a female agent.
oh wow. Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, that's something I always have to take into consideration. That's like one of the lesser known things, is that when I prepare for the airport, I have to prepare at like, like a little bit extra time because of just the pat down. Um, and luckily I have TSA pre too, but if there, I didn't always, and when I didn't, took so much longer. Like there's, especially when it's like a busy day, peak time to travel. And there are a lot of people chiming in the comments or in the Q&A talking about explaining to TSA agents and how frustrating it is. This is definitely a shared experience. Did hear that the recent scan, like X-rays, like don't mess with the technology. But I also get paranoid and like be like, what if? So I don't put it through anyway. But I have a lot of friends who just go through the regular scanner with their pump. Um, and I've had no issues. So who knows? Um, was there anything, I feel like I interrupted you, Athena, earlier when talking about the airport.
No, I don't think so. The one other thing I was going to mention that I learned about recently is um a lot of airlines offer extra baggage for people with like qualified medical condition. So you have to check the airline's policy, but it's usually like an additional carry-on bag if the airline does that,
I didn't
which is
know that.
cool because we have
Yep.
so many extra supplies that we have to bring.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's really helpful because yeah, we sometimes I just bring boxes and boxes of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I also at one point I brought juice through the scanner too and just told them like I can bring like I asked them like I have diabetes, can I bring this? Which they do let you. It's just that it takes a lot longer because they have to like do a lot to like make sure the liquid is okay. And so after that I stopped bothering. But you can do that. You can bring juice so that you don't have to buy juice because it's medicine for us. Which is something I want to mention. Another thing is a lesser known thing that you get accommodations at amusement parks. I was just talking about this with Erin the other day, who is a full-fledged Disney adult. And I am also one, but I don't want to admit it. But at Disneyland and Disney World, you get the Disability Access Services pass. And this is something that very much highlights the I don't know if I deserve this type of thought in a lot of people's head when especially when it comes to something recreational and something for leisure. Um, but there are very real reasons why we qualify for this pass. It's not just like random. We actually do, there are very real needs about having to sit down, having to go to the bathroom, having to spontaneously go and drink water and get something to eat, and having a comfortable and clean environment sometimes to do your finger sticks or to replace your supplies. And so while it may seem like a nice perk, it kind of, I just want to highlight that even in these like fun recreational environments, we deserve accommodations and we deserve to have, you know, the same level of fun as everyone else. And sometimes we can't because of our blood sugar. And sometimes it's a huge hassle and it kind of ruins the day that you spent like $200 on a Disney ticket and you have to leave because of your blood sugar. So just wanted to highlight that to advocate for yourself, not just in situations where it's needed, but also where you're there for fun and you deserve to have fun. Was there anything else that you guys want to add? I know we're super over time right now. Apologies. And thank you everyone for staying on.
Amanda, one thing you mentioned about like recreational places also, just like going to concerts. Like I've tried to bring, if I'm going to a concert and they have a security screening and they see like I love fruit pouches for my Lowe's or whatever I have in my bag, they're usually, you know, if there's like a no food policy, that'll always get flagged. So it's frustrating to always have to explain, but if you say I have diabetes and I need this, then they have to let you through legally. And just generally bringing food or beverages into no food spaces, you can always like explain that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing that I feel like it's definitely a matter of choice from person to person with diabetes, because it's very valid to just feel like this is a hassle. I don't want to deal with this. And a lot of people do that, me included. But you should know that you definitely have the right, like wherever you go legally, you have the right to bring food and to tell them, this is what I need. This is medicine for me. Someone in the comments said that they missed the comment about the extra baggage. Athena, would you mind repeating that?
Sure, and I think I need to look into it because somebody else in the comments mentioned it's not airline policy that it's a legal right. But I had said earlier that it depends on the airline, but most will allow additional carry-on baggage for people who need medical devices. So worth looking into more about whether it's also a legal right. Thank you both for flagging that. But just look at the airline policy or TSA policy.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And someone asked, are these accommodations only for type 1? No, they are not only for type 1. They are for type 2, all kinds of diabetes. If you have a disability, that's all it takes.
And all kinds of diabetes are included in ADA.
Yeah. So we're so over time, I think we should probably cut it now. But if you have a question that we didn't answer, please email us at info@diabetespac.org or go to our website or contact us on social media. We will, if I can't answer it, I will find a member of our team to answer. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Jessica and Athena, for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.